I'm going to try Balenciaga Harry Potter. I thought it was really funny, and hopefully you guys will learn something from it. If people are joining, I don't know if they will see this on sort of like their YouTube. Yeah, so my plan is to basically get a couple of references into here. I'm only using the primary front face of like this Balenciaga character. But usually what I'll do is I'll split that up in Photoshop and then basically draw some construction lines. That's going to help me when I put it into Pure F. So when I'm positioning the eye, it's basically going to be easier. So I usually just cross that very slightly. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll mark the either side of the eyeball so I can get the iris line basically in the eye length. And I do the same with the top and the bottom. Can also be good for the corners of the mouth. So instead of doing it by eye, you can just sort of like put it on top in ZBrush and maybe potentially the tip of the nose or where the nostrils end and basically like enter into the face. I'll also crop this quite heavily because I don't want all this wasted space. Obviously, we might eventually do this piece of clothing, but I can always come back to a different reference if I want to do that. Ideally, it's just getting rid of excess waste that's going to be on my ZBrush screen. I don't want too much of that. The difficult one with this is there's not going to be a front or side view. So that we've got the front, but there's no 3/4. This is like the only shot we've got to go off. So I'm going to be doing a lot of head from memory. And then obviously there's like the Daniel Radcliffe reference that I might be able to go back to. So let's export these. Save as. Let's put some PNGs, or we can go export PNG. You're working on some fur shaders. Is that from the, or is it sort of like more alpha fur? Tell you what, with this one, also what I sometimes do is just do like a central line, hide the background, and I'll quick export or export PNG without with a transparent background. I'm not too sure. It's just like generic tavern in music, fancy medieval music. I was just basically looking for something that wasn't copyrighted. So I promised myself once I hit 5, I'll move into ZBrush. Didn't put this on a schedule or tell anyone, is just in case sort of like the audio was crap or all those sorts of things. So can anyone confirm it? Oh yeah, that shade is really good for making carpets and shearling fur, but that's kind of the extent that it can do. Let's sub some references and use Spotlight for this. So the original reference we'll use in the guides. That looks so funny. It does help though sometimes, like when you need to overlay it without the opacity on, it's really helpful. But I appreciate it. It looks really funny. Well, let's get started. So yeah, if I sculpt from a sphere, I could be starting from a base mesh, but for something artistic like this, I like to do it from a sphere because you can get the macros and the large forms like very quickly. Adjusted mesh, you'll find that it will just end up looking like the base mesh, so it's quite nice just to start from scratch. I teach all the students to start from the side planes, the area that's going to create the temporal line. So for example, let's make this brush isn't working, it might be spotlight projection. If you pull in a reference and the it's not working, I believe if you go to brushes and then you've got samples, you need to turn off spotlight projection because then your brush isn't going to go through. But anyway, with trim dynamic, I usually just create the sides. You could use a cutting tool for that, but that creates a really nice temporal line. And for this Harry Potter character, he hasn't got much of a strong one. I know it's like AI generated. It seems to be sort of like smoothed over. So once that's in, usually what I do is just create a very small indication of the halfway point, which is going to be the eyes. And then this can all adjust later. The main thing is that we've got that landmark there. So say, for example, at some point we wanted to take it over to here and reference it. At least we've got that landmark to pull from. So, while we're here, we can actually just start to shape. Before doing that and bringing it over, I like to put in some more key landmarks. So you could sort of like mask the jaw here and pull it out. That can be quite a cool technique. And if you're a bit more experienced, sometimes you can just pull things out. Really important where you're going to be pulling it. So for example, if we pull it from the side of the face, we're obviously going to get a very large square jaw. But then if you pull it from the border, it's going to be more tapered. So that's something really to bear in mind. So first, basically going to, and you see the eye stretching, that's totally fine. Look at the reference to start with and try and get like a basic, so this can all change. I also like to put in a bit of a jawline, maybe an indicator where just a little slot, and then we'll add that as a subtool later. He's got quite a bony model look. What I'd usually start with is trying to make a bit of a skull first and then build skin on top of that. So if you imagine the first target is to build this guy's skull, so we could put in eye landmarks, then the temporal line we have, it starts to bring out like a natural eyebrow ridge, and then we can use that later. Go in under, that's going to create our cheekbones. This guy's got very big cheekbones. Cheekbone's going to be the widest part of the face, so around here is actually the widest part of, and there's also a secondary point sort of like up here, which is also going to be quite large. So we'll probably come back to that later and scoop it out. At this point, to bring out the jaw, I usually like to eat away at the back of the cranium like that, and then we can insert a neck in later. but it just means that we can start to move this jaw without accidentally moving all the sort of like the large shapes in the back. Just aim for something that's sort of like roughly a skull shape, and work on the silhouettes or like the outside of the character first. So just getting the first iconic shapes, which is like this quite sharp. There's also a very large taper on the overall shape of the head, so I'm going to try and sort of, it's not so realistic, but we're just going to have to bear with it. Here's probably, we're running out of a little bit of geometry, so I would dynamesh it. Always good to do a low resolution. I aim for, like, by default I aim for 64. It's just about enough to stop me going too far into the details, and it's sometimes useful to basically like move individual bits of geometry to create a face. Guys, well, I'll do a very basic outline. When I'm sculpting, I don't actually like to put in eyes until the very end, because it's super useful to create this this inside skull eye line. You can also insert just random landmarks, so we know the mouth is roughly going to be here somewhere, so that's going to be nice, and try and align that to other features in the place. So for example, his corner of his mouth is seeming to line up with the angle of his jaw, so we can take that interpretation and just move this mouth up slightly to represent that. Just means it's going to be a bit more accurate. We can put in, I usually like to put in the bone of the nose first, and then work on around the nose bridge, and then the nose, the actual nose itself, is something I'll put in towards the end. A good thing to do as well is just zoom out really far, and this makes us focus on the overall shapes, so we can get a really large move brush. I know the Harry Potter character has quite squished and square jawline, so we can introduce that. Don't forget to work on the side, because obviously we've only got a front. Usually what I aim for is aligning the eyes to the bottom of the chin, so something like this, and then let's bring the jaw back. We lost our ear reference, and you can also fix the shape of the head. When I'm teaching students, something that they'll often is the shape of the skull itself. So at this point, it's worth looking at it from the top. So the front of the cranium sort of tapers in and gives this egg. So if you put in these landmarks earlier, everything that you add on top is going to adhere to some nice anatomy. Another one is also the lower part of the chin. So if you look at the bottom of someone's chin, what sort of shape's that going to have? Obviously this is, but you want to go for that natural, going to be teeth in there, so that's the shape that you're going for. Put a very slight indication of where the ear is going to be, just so it doesn't mess up. Okay, it's looking a bit like South Park there. Will I feel more Balenciaga? I am Balenciaga. Right, now what I'm going to do is basically put in some character. I usually get a very big brush and then smooth away all the details. A pretty iconic part of this reference is his mouth, so we can start to introduce that. When I'm working on the mouth, I basically like to work around it and then go inwards. So for example, we'd start with the chin. He's got quite a pronounced divot here. You can also use trim brush to really define that feature. And also around the mouth, these sort of very large, that's where a lot of muscles connect, and for opening and closing your mouth, so we can insert those. His sort of lead up back into his cheekbone, and then because he's sucking in his cheeks, that's a looping shape here. So I could get a damn standard and just bring that in, sort of like a W shape. We also can do the top of the lip, or like in between the nose. So if I come down this way, and as I start to work on the outside bits, a mouth will just appear out of nowhere, which is quite cool. So here's the benefits of using quite low geometry. You can just literally move verts, and it keeps the lines quite straight when you do it. So ironically, this Harry, he's going to look a bit like Voldemort to start with, because he hasn't got a nose. But okay, at this point, it's probably safe to put in a little bit of a mouth indication. It's going to be hard because there's not too much geometry to work with, but you can sort of imagine it with your mind's eye, and we can also move these points to try and represent it. Lips can be one of the hardest things, because as soon as you move, I mean, the difference between just a couple of millimeters is like a completely different expression. So it's especially hard when you've got pouting characters like this one. Okay, maybe we can bring out a bit of a nose. That's why I leave the nose to the end, because we create all the structure beneath it first. Because if you imagine you've already sculpted the nose, it's going to be very hard to make this surface area. So with the nose, I like to lead it straight down like this, where it connects to the face. And then a very important move is on the inside of the nose and the eye. I'll just get this bit of clay and then pull it all the way back, give the bone structure around the eye. It's often missed because it's such a hard angle to achieve. So while I'm here, I'll also do the shape of the brow from the top, just to make sure that's all right. How long have I been in the industry for? So yeah, so I've been in the games industry where before Substance Painter existed. Let's put it like that. Okay, at this point, I'll probably put some more resolution, like especially if you're working on the nose. That's infamous for needing a little bit more, so maybe 120. Usually what I do is I smooth everything back, and I'll continue to repeat that process again and again. Okay, so let's make some progress. How about you guys? Where are you from? Are you in the games industry? Are you studying? Or so with the nose, what I usually do, it will have a lot of work on it. So I like to get this sort of diamond shape, and I'll create it with a damn standard. You can see it's kind of like a, and then I'll get heavy use of trim dynamics. So I'll just create a front leading face for the nose. Take these two structures on the side. That'll count as the side of the nose. You can put a dam standard, but usually what you find is that the skin and the nostrils blend back into the head. Because obviously those tubes in your nose go back into your head, so they're actually quite deep. And then before I put nostril holes in, I'll just do a flat surface, and then that means I can focus on the shape itself. So here it's looking a bit like in this structure. If you ever want to bring back some bone, I use a clay tubes and then use a technique called cross hatching, and you can just go like this, radiate out, and that's gonna I also like to do the bottom of the chin, gives us the geometry for the outside of the mandible, and then you can get a dam standard and then just lead, and that's going to create a nice jaw effect, and then you can fill it in with like a clay brush. Tighten up his jaw. For tightening up the jaw, I just use a bit of anatomy. We've got the cheekbones here, and obviously cheekbone's going to play a large part, but it's hard to see there because it's covered by glasses. But what you're looking for with the cheekbone here, the mouth barrel, is a very large trim brush. If I indicate it here, it's going to be a flat surface like that, and that's what's giving his look here. So you somewhat want to introduce that and make sure it leads all the way to the mouth. So in flattening there, I know that the angles line up quite nicely. And then usually with the back of the jaw here, creates another line, and then that's going to be angled towards the corner. Hello guys, yeah, I recognize some of your icons from Discord. So I mean, one of the fun things about teaching, one of the fun things about game art is that you obviously get to creating cool things. You're obviously doing it in silence and you're listening to a podcast or something like that. You're kind of doing two things at once. So you've got to make something cool, but also at the same time you've got to be informative. And streaming is an interesting one because the third layer to that is I started 3D beginning this year. I started on projects in base mesh. Do you think this is cheating? So it's only cheating if it's if you're learning, and I've mentioned it in a video, and the only person that you'd be cheating is yourself. If you're confident that you can create a base mesh and you've done it maybe let's say like 10 times, it's totally fine to download a base mesh to create something else. Maybe you want to show some other skills like your sculpting ability or retop. You wouldn't be creating a head like this from scratch every time. It would be really inefficient. That's really for you to decide. For the first, to be honest, if you did it for the first 1 or 2 years, if you didn't use a base mesh, you'd get very good at making heads. So I think the reason that I can usually make a head without a reference is because starting from scratch a base mesh many times. Base meshes didn't really exist that much, like this whole YouTube culture, and it'd be very hard to find a tutorial or any formal education. So there's so many more resources nowadays. Sort this nose out. So he's got quite a divoted in classic nose with the inside of the nostril. Usually a cool trick I do. We don't have too much geometry to use. You want it to curl round, almost imagine like a bit of a hook. So a mistake people make is that it leads all the way and vanishes back into the head. Whereas if you hook it back like it's trying to come this way and then point out again, it usually creates quite a nice silhouette. And then when you're working from the front and trying to replicate a shape, it's sometimes quite difficult. So I'd avoid using the front view that much. Try and use 3/4 views, because the front view is going to be dependent on so many factors. So for example, if we do an inside piece of geometry here, I want to do some cool stuff instead of working on anatomy. Anatomy is boring. Yeah, anatomy is boring. I think it's going to help you do the cool things that you want to do. So for example, I've done a lot of creature characters, and when I'm sort of being creative and creating different sorts of creatures, it comes from a fundamental of knowing the mechanics of like muscles and bones and things like that. So if you know how to make a human body, maybe like a bovine or something, it is gonna help you in the fun part, which is the creative process. So I wouldn't give it up too quickly. Before I put eyes in, I like to put a very like rudimentary, and then what I do is I make it look like he's closing his eyes. That means that when we're moving the mesh around, we don't care about destroying the eyes or the eye sockets that we do. But the benefit with this is you can actually already start to make the shape. So if we isolate here, make these horrible like clams. So push the backs of the eye so it wraps around the eyeball. So as long as it looks like someone closing their eyes, you're on the right track. And then we come in later and then just replace that with some proper geometry. So here I'm using a trim dynamic, and very faintly the mouth is starting to appear out of nowhere. I'm trying to focus on edges and planes like this and attack it from all angles basically. Nice reference here. I love these creepy AI generated videos. I'm from Hungary and work in an indie VR studio. I think I found your channel 1 or 2 months ago. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to append a sphere and then get a very rough indication of his hair hair. Then I'll move on to actually making sure that it matches this reference, like in terms of where so up until now it's just been really about landmarks. So this will, once this is in, first of all it will look very strange to start with. Okay, let's break some geometry. Really cool thing is, like, broken geometry kind of looks like hair, so it comes in useful quite often. Also get with the ear, usually what I do is I select the main mesh, come to IMM primitive, add one of these crappy little spheres, position that, and then because it's on the subtool, means it's very easy to manipulate with the main head. But I also can use masking to isolate it. He's got weird ass like AI generated ears. Maybe the AI picked up the like and then decided that kind of elfy looking ears was. So a cool thing about this is you can use Sculptris Pro if you want a little bit more control without breaking things. Yeah, I actually don't want to do the ear yet. I just want a bit of the because I'm going to be putting some glasses on there. Bring this down, note where it is. So usually the bottom of the ear correlates to the bottom of the nose. We're going to move all this around anyway, so it's all going to change, but it's roughly in that sort of area. And then the top of the ears usually align with around the eyes, and that's why you can wear glasses. Okay, as demonstration, like if I use move now, they will move together, or I can use the polyframes and then just move them independently, so it's very useful. So you guys, are you working as we speak or on this fine Sunday? So I was very close to not doing this stream because last night I kind of injured my shoulder. I was doing some weird stretches and my right shoulder feels a bit funny, even drawing it now. One thing I usually like to do if I feel crappy and like don't feel like doing, or there's a very viable excuse, one thing I like to do is just really go against it and see if I can impress myself by like persevering with it. And I basically use that technique, learning and stuff, and it's been very useful. So, you know, if you're feeling ill, try and super impress yourself and see if you can, in the hardest state, continue to make art. And then you build up this kind of like invincibility thing, and it will help you in the future. Also, brutal one is that it's a really nice day today. Some rough eyebrows in there. It's totally fine to add those because we can just smooth it out later. You're back in London. I must say, these lips, these are going to get fixed when we get a bit. Let's put some glasses in because that is going to be very important. Glasses, we can do a bit of a Boolean, I reckon. So let's put them in the folder. So the thickness of the glasses are going to change depending on the size. So I do want to get the scale first. Oh, we shall go live Boolean, turn this into, make sure it's the right way around. What I will do is I'm going to save it. I have a weird feeling it's going to crash. Right, I think I've still got these activated. Oh, there we go, it's added. So here's where the eyeball technique comes in. We can sort of like move these towards the eye and not worry about messing up too much. Not to gas you up too much, but it blows my mind that your approach is so direct towards form and feature. 4.5 years 3D, and it exciting to learn new ways to get about it. Yeah, everyone does it different ways. Sometimes I do it different ways depending if I want to have just like a bit of fun, or if I want to do production, it will be completely different. So production, I'd probably have a little bit more set up. I'd have more references. I'd do a far better job than doing this, and I'd be actually pretty much sculpting on top of that. But this is like a nice bit of practice, just looking at reference and trying to match it. While we're here, let's try it out. So there we go. Oh look, I've done all right. Holy shit, I might have done fucking perfect. Wait, the reason this is useful is a bit of a throw off because the lines are so thick. There's definitely improvements we could do. So let's just like close the jaw up a little bit, increase the hair size. That's going to be very okay. Center of the face is good. Nose position, mouth position, the mouth is all right. The eyeballs potentially could come, especially on its corners. Right, next thing, I forgot to put ears in that. That can be quite useful. The head don't look like a head unless it's got a neck. Okay, so neck size, it's usually aimed at the corners. Maybe let's get another light in here somewhere. Any questions so far while I'm sort of looking for this? Okay, so if you see here, I'm sculpting from a distance. I like to coin it as fit from a distance. FF8, fit from a distance. So keep on saying that, and as long as it looks good from a distance space, you don't know. Okay, just creating something that could look like a neck. This sort of weird shape when I first do it, because it means it's nice to stretch out some. We'll blend that in later. Lean forwards a bit too much. These parts of the muscles go all the way up to the head here. Connections kind of looking okay. Let's just make this the neck itself, not the traps, because we can add them later. And also he's got a bit of a shirt on. Okay, he's looking a bit like hench Harry Potter. Let's straighten up the neck. Okay, so the only reason I want this here to start with, because when it blends all back together, it's much easier to make, is just so I can get this silhouette. That's all I really want. he's meant to be attractive. How do you approach learning change over the years in the industry? I started with, well, first of all, just like consistently doing projects. So the more you're doing the projects, obviously I did a big transfer from a couple of softwares, like from 3ds Max to Maya, because I saw there was a big industry shift that was happening there. There's somewhat of an industry shift happening with Blender, although it's kind of a false shift, because in the games industry it's like we still really need Maya for like retopology and stuff. It's just all the free energy is in Blender, so it looks like it's very popular, but the making game assets isn't that great. Like it's good for and apart from that, yeah, just making projects and keeping up to date with any software update and seeing if that can either optimize some workflow or if there's a cool thing I want to try out. I always like testing out different types of tech, so I do lots of like environments, foliage, weather systems, characters, creatures, and testing out how to achieve very specific things. So whether it's like dreadlocks for a very specific type of drapery or a specific shader, it's fun sort of like learning process. It's just like trying to discover how to do something. I reckon we can go high resolution. I refrain from going up resolution very, this time it was probably a bit extreme. So when we do Dynamesh, it means that the ears are going to connect. So it might be an idea to split those off first, because we still want to actually finish those ears. When you go up a subdivision layer or a Dynamesh layer, I suggest instead of being a bit more like tactically, so just smooth components instead of just like broad area. Like obviously, if you don't want to see a certain part, you can smooth it quite extremely. It's sometimes nice just to ignore the nose look here. It first has to look a bit like this before we can make it look good. So it's going to be a nasty little, going to look like Michael Jackson a bit. So I'm doing a terrible thing, which is just making a nose without a reference. Much better to follow along with something. This guy doesn't exist, so sort of forced to do that. But I guess him being Balenciaga, it's going to have quite a few sharp features. So the hard thing about sculpting lips is to not accidentally make the pout that they're doing in real life. I often find that I'm doing it like I'm actually trying to do the lip structure that they've got. I'm surprised that the side isn't as messed up as it can be. Usually when you're doing the lips from the front, you go to the side and then it's like completely off. Okay, so we'll double check with the mouth as well that it's so just bring these sections back just so it's got a like your grandma's dentures, that kind of shape going to it. Doesn't make much difference from the front, but when it starts to as an artist, right, you're gonna have a lot of traps. So obviously spending too much time on a specific area or trying a little too hard to match a specific reference, the end user's not going to care that this is matching this reference identically. They just want to see the sort of like the brand and the emotion from it. So do remember not to get stuck in the weeds like I am. Perfection is the enemy of good. So what sort of angle is this guy doing? He's sort of like, yeah, I saw your questions in the Discord. It's just finding a spare moment to do it. Like I want to give them a bit of justice, you know, not just skim over it in so I might do some videos for that because they're big questions, you know. They're worthy of an entire video. Any tips on retouch and projecting details back in ZBrush when I'm making it seems to really mess up the projecting process. You maybe like a mouth bag, like an internals. Yeah, that's definitely a process technique you need to get used to. Might suggest separating them when you edit, whenever you do a projection, and then welding it on. Do you make hard surface stuff in ZBrush or Maya? What do you suggest to newbies like me? So I guess more details on how far along you are and what you've been doing so far, but I would definitely learn sculpting in ZBrush and don't be scared to go straight into retopology and game stuff. That's really going to differentiate you from someone who's just like learning how to do ZBrush. The guys that can go in and actually retop something, bake it, that'll make a difference. Watch streams, watch videos, all that sort of stuff, and actually just make stuff. Never assume that you know how to make it. Go and do it. I see that a lot with students, is that I know how to do that, so I don't need to learn it. But when they actually get into it, all these errors come up, and then they come back and go, how do I make it? If you were a student, what software would you use for hard surface? I would use, well, it depends what kind of hard surface. I think like if it was topology based hard surface, like subdiv, I'd use Maya. No, I'd use Blender maybe, or Maya. And then for just everything else, I'd use ZBrush. And I think I got a video for that as well, on like how to sculpt in ZBrush, and then use, don't know if I made the video for it, but using retop to actually make that hard surface stuff. Indication of an eye, and then we can put an eyeball in just to see how it's going to look, or maybe put a bridge on those glasses because it's annoying. So how are you guys enjoying it so far? Are you finding this useful? I'm sort of testing it out to see if I'd be able to sculpt some stuff and like answer questions on a Sunday. Yeah, and with a lot of hard surface stuff, everyone wants to be very precise with their hard surface, you know, like make these perfect edges, perfect bevels and triple edge loop corners and stuff. Like throw that out the window. It's pointless. Just sculpt something that roughly looks like that hard surface and fix it all later. Making things with Maya and all these edges and flows is just takes so much time, and it stops the creative process quite hard. You know, sometimes I don't even append a box. I'll just like sculpt a box on top of it. So it's just so much faster. And the nice thing about the primitives as well, like not that much geometry. So when you do make a move, it almost looks quite a hard surface anyway. Before I put these glasses on, I want to... Damn, this hair is jazzy, man. Give Harry Potter some better posture there. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually trying to make some space for the glasses before I put them in. Let's mask that and just smooth all that way. I'm going to start inflating that ear. Really good to watch your process. It makes me reflect on how I can make my methods in ZBrush fast, because it takes me a long time to make it. Yeah, it takes long to make those things, doesn't it? It's just had a heart attack because the new emergency alert system has been tested in my area. Dude, I just heard that. So what the hell was that? I heard like some I thought it was like a YouTube thing that was happening to me, but it was actually like an alarm system. Was there like a nuclear thing down here? They could be doing it around loads of people have different styles of ear connection. And it's going to be sort of like kind of towards the back actually. Now Harry's one, I'm assuming it's quite a skin connected one. It's going to blend, and he doesn't seem to have too much of a lobe. So this is all going to be one continuous connection. It's a damn AI ear, man. It's got to match the reference anyway. Okay, so we are trying to get this shield shape back in with his head. He is so wide on the top, sort of like squished a bit. Okay, there's a big head section here. Try and like create that negative space. Let's adjust this so it's close to the reference. Maybe so I mean, the nice thing about sculpt is hair. We keep it like this, and then later we can decide if we want to either sculpt it better, add some additions, or turn it into like a simulated hair. For this, I'm just going to keep it sculpted. Do like a vague indication of every brush I use is basically some kind of formation of a default brush. This is so for like hairlines I just use, and if for anyone it's just for me to see where things are flowing, and then I can bulk that up later with maybe like a brush or a clay build-up. Also, when you're working from a reference that does only have one perspective shot from the front, obviously we're trying to make a bit of a silhouette here, but it's important to note where that silhouette is being made. So is it being made by the front of the hair, like this section, or is it being made by the back of the hair, or is it being made by the center? So it's really important. His hair seems to be emanating from sort of like, so what I usually do is just get that location I identified, make a bit of a spike, and I can use that as the front silhouette, sort of just adjust it. Yeah, so he's getting get the proportions fixed a bit. Glasses is resting on his nose, because obviously everything has to be physical, and the more you look at a reference, the more weird it gets. Here's here we go. What we might be getting into is that his head's getting a bit long. So that happens when you're working, you know, if we're working on the chin here, it naturally wants to, when you add clay, it naturally like comes down, or if you're working on the top of the head, obviously so it naturally wants to go higher. So you always have to come back and just make sure that you readjust everything. So at this point, I'm going to do like a little bit of a readjustment. I'm going to try use a very big, might be an idea to put it near the reference, just so I don't have to keep on looking across the place. Cheekbones are a little bit weird, so they're a bit wider, almost like he's got a large, like an over exaggerated. So a human's eye socket would be smaller. His seems to be quite large, but also that could be the style of the glasses that are throwing off that perspective. So when people wear makeup and glasses, obviously it can be a bit difficult, because the whole point of the glasses and the whole point of the makeup is to deceive in a nice way. Obviously, it's probably safe to put the corners of the glasses on. In fact, actually what I'm going to check is just the 3/4 view. Forwards a little bit too much. Bring out this area. I'm trying to go for like that kind of shape, like it from where the eye sockets are. The brow usually comes up a little bit, comes out from the 3/4 view. So just see what effect that had on your front and side view. Just make sure you didn't mess anything up. There's a cavity here. That's because the style of his character is actually sucking his cheeks in. So you would have quite a cavity on the silhouette there, as annoying as it is. So the head, if you just have a neck, it's going to be very, it's going to throw you off quite a lot, because you need the shoulders to seat the head. So I might have to push some shoulders in just so I can get the right perspective of the neck and the connection. So we'll move on to that after I get the glasses in. Got this little bit. And then when we're making glasses in ZBrush or like the games industry, you don't want to put the glass in, because ZBrush is pretty crap at rendering anything transparent. It also has a bug, which is, you've probably seen me do it about 12 times, is that when you come out a move tool and then go back to a brush, for some reason it like gets rid of the alpha. So there's lots of strange things about the software. Let's fix that. So I mean, Balenciaga is like, it's borderline attractive but sad. Might look like he's about to sort of like burst into tears at any point. Okay, so now at this point I've literally just been in orthographic view the whole time. Might be an idea every now and then to come out just to see physicality that the character has, and if anything's sort of like looking a bit strange, you can get a better sense for like the size of the nose, for example. So in perspective, the nose is looking quite large, and that's because it is. So what we can do is just like reduce the size of it. Damn, I missed the stream. Also, hi, hello, Balenciaga Harry Potter. I mean, yeah, I saw a well, first of all, you can, I think it's recorded, right? So you can watch through it. There might be a lot of fluff at the start because I was setting up some references. The Balenciaga, I think it's just like AI generated Harry Potter is like in the Balenciaga universe. So it just made me laugh. And so I thought, great, I want to sculpt it. That's how you should approach most things, you know, have a little bit of fun of it. If something entertains you, maybe you can interpret it in so if you're a 3D modeler or you're a games artist or a 2D concept artist, just like try and represent that. Okay, let's work on some anatomy. Let's just make sure. Okay, let's get some other bits in. So we're going for an hour and a half. That went very fast. So it seems, you know, we've got the main theme there, which is quite cool. Obviously we've got to do the eyes, but I think once we get some clothing in, it's gonna, you never know, next week I'll do like Dumbledore or do some different Balenciaga Harry Potter characters. Is there Balenciaga Warhammer? Okay, we'll have to look at that. Maybe that can be some clothing time. Let's build some shoulders out first. This is all going to get covered up, so I'm not fussed too much about how it looks. We'll just do some basic, kind of looks pretty strong for Harry, is get mass. So this will just be an indication of where the clothes can go and where they'll slightly stop. Balenciaga models, I guess they're infamous for like wide shoulders or unrealistic looking shoulders. Okay, we want these, this wants to flow a bit nicely, a bit nicer into the neck. With the next connection to the body, I usually like to keep the neck separate because obviously that's where all the bones and the muscles are contained, and then everything around it is quite divoted in here, and then the front silhouette is made by the back muscles here, so you can just sort of shape those out. Traps that come out like that a little bit. Normal people just quite flat. Then to separate the shoulder from the main body, just put like a little transition there, just like a damn standard with but anyway, this isn't an anatomy class yet. So he's got a shirt. What I'll do first is make the folds of the shirt like that kind of like lapel look. For this I'll use, now there's a couple of ways we'll do this or could do this. Mainly what I like to so basically what I like to do is treat it like it's a physical piece. So I'll make it long enough that it can wrap around the character's neck. Let's say if we're starting from back here, and also we want to make it as tall where it can be folded in half. So I can solo that. At this point might be an idea to, and then use dynamic subdivisions. And then with dynamic subdivisions toggled, you can use, and so that's just like a previewer. So any Z remesh or any features that will change is not going to be affecting this Dynamesh subdivision. I'll look at the geometry. Basically what I'll do is I'll make a bit of a V shape. And I can do that with smart or intelligent masking, not to confuse Substance Painter. And then quite literally just invert it and then we can bend it. That's just a very quick way. I usually pull it back a bit and then it creates like a nice little bevel there. So this is going to be the inside of the shirt and then that's going to be the outside. His is quite folded. So now we got this piece of geometry to play with. Let's save before we do any advanced stuff. I'll come into, oh God, look at it. I'll come into, and then there's a useful deformer called the bend curve. And then we can insert more resolution into that curve, maybe just 5 to start with. And then if you look at it from the top, in fact, let's not use symmetry because it's okay. And then you can basically just wrap a collar around and then use that as a starting point. So this Balenciaga collar is very big. What might be an idea, you can squeeze and twist these with these informers so you can get the collar to rotate slightly, make sure that it's got the right. He's got a closed shirt, so it's going to be very close to each other like this. And that's good. From the reference I'm looking at, his collar goes up pretty far as well on the back, so it looks to be aligning to the back of his hairline. And then his shirt one is about half of that, so it's around his Adam's apple reference point, sort of like around here. So it's always good to take note of that early to save you a bit of time. Cool, that's good. So after that, I'll just accept it. And then I'll use the move tool just to get the basic shape of it. Move topological is going to be good for, I'll show you a cool trick with this after. So after you've done some heavy manipulations, there's a way of making it nice and neat. But the good thing about this process is it's like highly creative. As a complete feature, then I'd move on to the next section, like the lowest common denominator. So that would be could be smart about this. We could actually duplicate this, or it might have a little trouble. It will have trouble if I heavily manipulate manipulate it. So what could be an idea, duplicate it to store the shirt, go back to the original and then scroll the history all the way back. And then now we've got this piece, then we can come back to and then just make the new section. But first, it's worth scaling up. There are more streams. Yeah, maybe I enjoyed this. So, and if you guys found it valuable, those are the two metrics that I'm going off, is if I enjoy it and you guys enjoy it as well. I mean, if you have any suggestions for streams, I mainly look in the Discord. Okay, now, so the AI reference hasn't done very well in interpreting the jacket. So it's actually not very clear what the collar's doing. It's kind of blended back into it's like a leather wrap. It's kind of strange. So we just have to assume what's going on there. It's probably trying to interpret a very large jacket collar, which is flat on this section. So it's opening up slightly. At this point, it might be cool to add some color. Let's just go into the subtools, turn on all the poly meshes here and the poly paints. I use it quite a lot. So I have the fill object here. Like I hotkey it and I also put it on the side piece. That means I can pick a color like a grayscale and then fill the object. And then I come back to the original. Damn, Harry Potter, fucking hell. Okay, I guess we can turn this into a bit of a bust. So I think we'll end once I get some eyes in. I think that'll be a good finalize. Very quick interpretation of a shirt. I will just do this kind of like free form. What I'll do, Dynamesh, so we got some nice resolution and I'll mask this section just so I know which bit's being shown. Okay, now that's the bit we're working on. So if you've seen my other videos, understand that I like to make hard surface elements with just sculpting in. As you can see, it's quite fast. And then I would polish it up later, things like H polish. So it's very useful to sculpt in something like this quickly. And then you can pass it on and then find out if you're doing it a different way. Maybe it's a simulated piece of cloth or your art team decides to do something else with it. Okay, some very simple. Let's bring some asymmetry in. So I might change the background color because he has a black leather. I usually have black, so it's very easy to see silhouettes. But in this circumstance, we do need different ones. So guys, how are you enjoying Balenciaga Harry Potter so far? I've done an okay job. Obviously very intimidating starting from a sphere. So I'll bring it down a little bit further, and that's just to basically like accentuate this, because in the AI generation, it's kind of like interpreted that and given that like Balenciaga look. So I'm trying to make sure that that's coming across. So what I need to do is actually need to merge the neck and otherwise it'd be quite difficult. Honestly, at the start, I thought this would take you a while, but watching from the start now, it makes me feel like I should just try and let less. To be honest, this took longer than it would usually be because it's sort of like talking through the process as well. But surprisingly, yeah, an hour or two, you can get something knocked out, like a concept. The hard stuff and the things that take most time is making it into a games mesh or just like polishing up certain areas. For example, if I now go into the eye, but we might as well do it. Okay, so we look at this guy. So with the eyes, you can go macro, append eyes. Yeah, even when I paint the iris and the cornea and all that, I don't use radial symmetry or anything. You're basically aiming for about 50% on this side, 50% on the inner side. Radcliffe's got blue eyes, I think. So this, I mean, you could use like some pre-made eyes. You can buy those all over the place or just make your own sets. But this is just as fun. With the cornea, I'll basically do, you can also put a tiny little highlight at the bottom, fake shade at the top. What's also going to be important is fake crazy until we do the eyelashes and eyes. So this is a bit of fakery, really. It's basically just like 2D concepting. Probably gonna look a bit crappy, but as you can tell, I am not a 2D artist. Okay, so we can use that as a reference for scaling the eye. So I usually like to draw the cornea and the iris in first and use that as a scaling reference. As long as it's 50% on the inside, 50% on the outside. You could do the overall eye, but you can't actually see the overall eye unless you're in transparent mode. So it's a useful trick. Okay, it looks like Stoner Harry. So let's sculpt the cavity out. So basically like get rid of, this is where it's very useful because now we can build eyelids around this, but then keep the structure. So it's nice. You'll have to bear with me. So I'll also push them in. So it's about one eye's length in between as well. And vaguely one eye on the outside, but this is sort of a stylized character. And then at this point, after you've done those eye sockets, you'd come back and adjust the surrounding areas so it fits and matches that eye. So for example, we can change the width of the nose to better reference this the scale of this eye, maybe some of the outer bones and stuff. Okay, intense Harry Potter, young Johnny Depp. Yeah, it does actually. Maybe that's where the AI sort of picked up from. Okay, with the eyelids, here's another cool trick. So I'll duplicate the eyeball, hide the poly mesh. Let's turn it to a gray, slightly bigger from the center. Then I'll mask the top, and then I'll come and basically split that off. Let's dynamesh it first, actually, just so we can do that. So yeah, I'll mask this top, and then I'll come to split, then I'll re-dynamesh it, and then that gives me 2 sections of a lid. Obviously the top one, we're now going to go to a bit of a Pac-Man look. So I'm just going to rotate the top one, looking at the reference, and then that gives us basically a borderline, and then we can create the silhouette of the eye. So his opened up eyes. The bottom of the eyelid usually aligns with, depending on how tired the person is. Now, what we can do is, if we hide everything and just show the lids in the eye, basically grab this section, pull it out. It's going to create the inside of the eye. And you can add some more, some people like to put some actual anatomy in there as well. So with the eye, I'll also look at the negative space of the whites. So the whites of the eye, his one's quite small, very triangulated. So I'll try and replicate that. It needs to come in slightly. But remember, when you're working with the eye, in doesn't mean side to side, it means wrapping around. So you have to take some different angles. We could do something pretty smart as well. We could start to hide and show parts of the eye. So with the main character, you could then basically only show the eye section, hide the glasses and all those sorts of stuff. Now it definitely looks like Johnny Depp, especially with the black components to make the shape of the eye. Edits depending on if there's a bit of fat sort of like going over, especially older people where they don't have as much like collagen around that area. There's a nice divot that usually happens above the inside of the eyelid there. It's usually a line that comes down. I want to remember, we want to have a clear indication of where the edge of the bone line is. So if it's missing a bit, just reinsert it like that, and then you can shape it around the eye. And then this sort of harsh transition we're going to cover up later when we blend it all back in. So there's going to be another bit of skin that basically goes on top of that. The outside of the eye, again, is just like looking at the negative space. So what I do, bring these forwards and just close that area. So it might involve a bit of this. And then in terms of thickness, I usually like to give it a little bit more thickness than is realistic, just so from a distance it looks good. It's the same with characters. We want a lot of geometry to collect normal map information. So it's usually a good habit to get into. So when you're making the eye, I suggest focusing on a couple of points. So obviously the center is the main point. The corners of the eyes, like how are they aligned to the center? Are they up from it or are they down from it? The center of the eyelid, where is that? What's the arc like? Is it very acute at the top? Like basically what's the parabola there? And also the negative space that we went through. So how much of the eyes are the white? And then if you go along those lines, you'll get quite accurate, whatever reference you're basically trying to copy. Now what I'll do is basically just a bit of skin around here. So when we come to dynamesh it all together, so it always looks funny at this point because the eyelids are so perfect. They're almost like hard surface metal. This area is usually quite tight. Bone comes very close to the eye. That bone has its reasons, right? It's to protect your eye. So that's why it's usually quite close, and just it's usually a little bit further extended from the head. I reckon we're going to have some fixing to do because I hid the geometry there and made some moves. So okay, so let's see how that looks from a distance. Bring everything back because hey, there we go. It could be that other objects in the scene are going to throw that visual off and make it look, so we just have to double check that it looks all good together. His eyes are so open. He looks spooky. Yeah, exactly. Do you bake this model afterwards? Yeah, we could bake it, maybe put it in Unreal Engine. That could be the next one potentially. Which software do you use for coloring? I would use Substance Painter, maybe like a teeny tiny bit of reference coloring in ZBrush, and then if it's a cinematic character, I would incorporate a little bit of Mari just so it can handle high. So now let's start to tweak this. I want to, so in the references, it's also got a bit of a squint. Eyes are very similar to the mouth. Micro change that you make completely changes the emotion. So that is one very difficult thing about character artists, is that we have these AI systems known as people that are really good at assessing the emotion of a character. So it is the hardest test. Okay, let's start to let's blend this back onto the main guy. Now when we soften it, we've got a nice eye line that was easy to position at the start. Like if that was connected to the actual head, it'd be very difficult. So now I can just sort of blend it back in with the skin. Oh, I forgot this. Do the ears at the same time. Tell you what, he also has very funny AI eyes. They are not how they should be, but if I am copying a reference, I'll try and get it. So what's missing here? Damn standard with a low intensity and a high focal shift. Bring back a bit of this eye socket. You see what's happening here? So it's a very broad move, and it means we don't have to like sculpt. And unfortunately, we can't see what's actually happening underneath. Okay, now let's put some AO in there. Surprisingly changes it quite. It's always nice to have actual, like, one weak point of ZBrush. So it's very difficult to like, that's why I often just leave them blank, start to preview it in a different engine, basically. It's almost not, sometimes it's not even worth putting them in. Mutiny, I can't seem to get the first shader opacity to work in Substance and put the OP shader on as well in Substance. So yeah, double check you've obviously got the channel. You also have to change the shader. So it will be alpha dithering or something like that. But in all honesty, if you're trying to like preview shader stuff, just start to look at it in your renderer. So maybe it's like Marmoset or Unreal Engine, because they don't go one-to-one. They don't. Right, guys, what do you reckon? Shall I finish it around here, or what improvements can you see? I'm probably starting to get a bit of artist haze from looking at this guy so much. Fake details on the hair. ZBrush budget hair, which is just snake hooks all over the place. The trick with sculpting hair is to only sculpt it where it's actually making a bit of a difference, because we don't have time. We don't have time for that kind of stuff. He's got a very annoying haircut, which kind of swirls all over the place. So those eyes, they're a bit saturated. It's kind of throwing it off a bit. I hate ZBrush eyes. So the eyebrow is a good one. You can basically just extract some clay. Okay, back to budget hair, snake hook. That's so Johnny Depp, isn't it? Have you explored ZBrush rendering? It's quite fun to make the NPR shading. Don't feel obliged to spend half a day with us. Yeah, no worries, man. It's completed to a state where it looks like a 3D Harry Potter Balenciaga. So that's basically it. And if there's tips along the way that's useful, that's also a bonus. But no, I would never force myself here. If it, like if you're doing art and it starts to suck, just step away from it. But I'm quite enjoying just like dabbling with this. Okay, so the main thing is it looks good from whatever your target is. So if it's like a thumbnail or just like an art station, just make it look good from a distance. Fucking hell. Right. Okay, let's see if we can get a render. Orthographic or perspective. The reference shot is quite... Maybe we will come back to it and make it real time, put it in Unreal Engine. That could be quite cool. Do some like retop and stuff. But yeah, thanks for joining me. So if you haven't already, subscribe. I'm going to be releasing lots of YouTube content. So it's like basically how to low poly things, make high poly representations like this mesh. There's loads of stuff to come. I'll probably do a couple of more sessions again, maybe like a different Balenciaga thing, like the Warhammer session was quite cool. And also make sure you join the Discord community. So that's basically where I recognize a couple of you guys from there as well. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your Sunday and any projects that you're working on. And I'll try and work out how to end this stream.